All right, this is Sports for Real with Coach Hall. I'm doing something I never said I was going to do, and that's break out some food while I was talking about football or whatever else. But I had to stop by Jersey Mike's, and I caught me what they call a Big 56, a big giant kahuna, whatever you want to call it. But it's just a fancy name for Philly cheesesteak from a company based out of the Jersey area. If you haven't spent much time in Philadelphia or Jersey, you need to go there if you want some real good cheesesteaks. But I've been kind of ripping and running lately, and I had a chance to talk about the college football playoffs. Well, those some great matchups, right? A lot of people are saying because the games were so close, that it proved the point that Florida State shouldn't have been there, given the way that they got blown out by Georgia and the closeness of the other games. Again, that didn't mean much of anything. Once Florida State was kept out of the playoffs, and those guys were being denounced, pretty much saying that your conference is no good. If you go undefeated and you're not worthy enough to go to the playoffs, I mean, what are you good for? You know, the SEC is good, but they almost got left out of the playoffs themselves. Had Florida State not lost their quarterback and Alabama winning over Georgia, that would have put the SEC champion out because Texas had the advantage over them, given that they went to their backyard and beat them one-on-one. But anyway, the point today is the college football championships. Alabama played a great game, but they just a little bit off. And Coach Saban said that he was a little bit off, and you can see by some of the plays they were making, especially that last play in overtime. You know, this guy Milroe, he's made a lot of progress as the season went on. But as you looked at the way Milroe played, it brings up the old question. Can a running quarterback really take you to a championship? I've contended that unless the quarterback can stand in there and throw it, whether he can run or not, he's not fixing to win a championship. I'm sorry. And what that is a glimpse into the future of what you've been seeing with the Ravens and the NFL. Jackson can run all day in the playoffs. You got a completely different game plan of how you're going to play somebody in the regular season than what you're going to see in the playoffs. And he can run, he's going to win another MVP and all of that. But can you throw it in there when it counts the most? If he wants to be an impression on me, throw the ball when it counts the most. But again, back to the college football. Alabama just couldn't do it. And Michigan, they had all kind of ways to keep Alabama in the game, and they almost blew it in the end. Take that punt. I had just told the guy that I was sitting next to, I said, look, the only way that Michigan can blow this is the guy go back there and he fumble the punt. Sure enough, not only does he get inside the 10 and try to field the ball on the 5, but he bobbled the ball. He fumbled it. Lucky for him, he was able to pick it up in time and enough to secure it so he didn't fumble again. Normally what happens, guy fumbles the ball, no problem. He picks it up. He tries to run, or as soon as he picks it up, boom, he gets hit. The other team picks up the ball. And that had been Alabama falling on the ball in the end zone. The way things have gone for Alabama the last 10, 15 years, once I saw that ball hit the ground, I knew Michigan was in trouble. But again, once Michigan picked the ball up and the guy didn't fumble it, I knew Alabama was in trouble because right there, they let you know right then it was not their year. But Michigan is going through all kind of controversies and suspensions and people talking about them stealing signs and all that. What are you going to say now when all the big games that you play, you are defeating people? You're going to say they're stealing signs against Alabama or Ohio State or the Big Ten championship? Did they steal Washington signals from the Sugar Bowl game? It's kind of hard to justify saying that the only reason they're there because they stole signals. That ain't the case at all. And Michigan has used all that information to bond together to say that we're going to do this no matter what. But in comes Washington. Before I get to Washington, well, let's talk about Washington now. Washington's been on the edge all year. They are a better brand of USC. Their defense played just good enough to help them win the game. But the defense is not good enough if the offense is off to win a game. So, having said that, Texas kept coming back at them. and they had a chance to win the game in the end, and they did what Auburn did not do. They put their people back, they knew it was going to be a jump ball, and they swatted the ball away to win the game. Simple, right? But you put yourself in that position. But the one thing that you can't deny is the explosiveness of Washington's offense. Penix arguably should have been the Heisman winner. But Daniels, he had a great year, so you can't deny that he won it. But normally what they would do, they would take the quarterback with the best team or the best record, and he would be the one winning the Heisman Trophy. So under that situation, Penix should have been your Heisman Trophy winner, because there's been a lot of average quarterbacks who won the Heisman only because they were on the better team. But that didn't happen for Penix. So in my mind, I think he's taking the Vince Young approach. He didn't win the Heisman, and he used that as fuel to try to prepare himself through these playoffs. No, Young didn't have to go to the playoffs. He just had to win that one game. But it's the same mindset. I'm taking this as a snub. My team is taking this as a snub. We're going to put that on our back, and we're going to ride that straight through to the championship game. So now you have Washington, who's going to take on Michigan. There's some history there. These guys played several times in the regular season over the years. But the most memorable of times, I go take you all the way back to the '92 Rose Bowl game. That year, Washington whipped everybody. California, USC, Oregon, you name it. They whipped everybody. That team was loaded. They had a lot of guys that went to the NFL. In this area right here, Mark Brunell, who was splitting time that year with, I think his name, Brock Hewitt. On defense, you had that guy, Steve Entman. The only reason he didn't go to the NFL Hall of Fame because he kept getting hurt. Hey, there's nothing you can do. But man, that dude, that was bad. I seen him one time on a night game against Miami. He rushed the quarterback, jumped up, caught the ball in midair. Instead of swatting it down, he just caught the whole thing. That's the kind of player he was. But the man just couldn't stay healthy. If he would have stayed healthy, Steve Entman would have been in the Hall of Fame. I have to go with that. But the other side of the ball, back to the offense, Brock Hewitt, Mark Brunell, and they had this one guy that was a running back. I think his name was Bean O'Brien. Bean O'Brien was a great player, but just like Steve Entman, he kept getting hurt. Matter of fact, Bean O'Brien was the first guy I ever heard of who got 6 years of eligibility. You know, a lot of times players are red shirt, and then you can also at that time get a medical red shirt. Now Penix, his situation is different. He did his 4 years, probably got his red shirt, came back for the 5th year, graduate transfer, however they do it. Plus they got that extra year that they could use if they weren't tied up into the COVID situation. And I think Penix took full advantage of that. But back in that '91 team, they just whipped everybody. And in the Rose Bowl that year, they played Michigan. Michigan wasn't as high powered as they are now. They were still a good football team, good enough to win the Big Ten. And at that time, Ohio State had their troubles trying to beat Michigan. Much like the things have switched around now, Ohio State really couldn't beat Michigan. But in this case, they were overmatched. And it was evident from the opening kickoff. Just like they had whipped everybody in the Pac-10 all year long, they ran right through Michigan. I think they beat them like something 34-14. And they end up with the Coaches Poll Championship. And the only reason they didn't get both polls, the Coaches Poll and the AP, is because Miami had also gone undefeated. So the question is, who's the better team? At the time, you didn't have the playoff system, so it went down to the vote. And coaches took Washington, the press took Miami, and the teams never met. Having said that, over the years, the schedules were, back then, the schedules were made 10, 12 years in advance. So I think that led to the fact that Miami and Washington wanted to play against each other to see who was the best, even though 10, 12 years would be a completely different setup. So they played in 2000 up in Washington. They beat Miami that year, and that's the only loss Miami had. I think Washington had one loss, so they were up for a possible championship, just like Miami was up for a possible championship, but neither one of them got it. But in 2001, that's the year when Miami whipped everybody, and they went through and won the national championship. So there's a tie there with championships with not only the University of Michigan and Washington, but Miami is included in that also. But going back to the Rose Bowl, back in '92, again, that season was a follow-up to the previous year. This time, Washington, they didn't go undefeated. They lost a game or two, but they're still good enough to win the Pac-10 at the time. Michigan came back with the Big Ten title again, and this time they had a great ball game, completely different than from what happened the year before. And I think Michigan ended up pulling that one out 38-31. So there's some history between these two teams. And I think it's ironic that Michigan always represented the Big Ten, and now the Pac-12 was represented with Washington. Now they're going to be in the same conference, the Big Ten. So when you're looking at the college football championships, you're going to be looking at a Big Ten conference that is huge winners in all this. What a great advertisement for the Big Ten. You got your old champion, and now you got a team that's coming in next year to join the fray. So when you look at the college championship on Monday, you're going to be looking at the Big Ten. Now, as far as that game goes, Michigan seems to have the magic over their head. They got that magic star shining. They're going to be a hard team to beat. But on the other side of that, Washington, that guy Penix, the way he's throwing that ball, he's cutting up man coverage. He's carving up zone coverage. If you don't put any pressure on Penix, it's going to be a long defensive night for Michigan. But they have the people up front who can get some pressure on Penix and make it a very uncomfortable evening for Mr. Penix. But Penix is not going to quit. Just like McCarthy is not going to quit. So it's going to come down to which defense is going to make the play. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to come back later, and as time goes by, adding up to the championship week, I'm going to see if I can break down offense versus defense for both teams and see if we can determine together that makes sense which of these teams are going to win. But despite all of that, it's going to come down to heart. Now, X's and O's, heart, who makes the play. And if Michigan, they got away with those dumb stuff they were doing on special teams against Alabama, I don't think they're going to be able to do it against Washington. But Washington, they've been living on the edge. How much longer can you live on the edge before you fall off the cliff? It's an interesting question to debate, but it's one that I can't wait to see get resolved. So I just want to bring up the historical aspect of the Big Ten and the Pac-10 and how the Big Ten is a clear winner in this college football derby. And with the four teams coming in, Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, and the way Florida State is acting, they can't wait to get away from the ACC. But I don't think the Big Ten would be a good fit for them. Nor do I think they're going to be able to get out of that land grant of rights deal with the ACC. They're going to be stuck for another 10 years. And it's serving right. You signed the deal, you ought to stay there. But as far as them getting blown out and deserving it, I don't believe that. I think the only reason Georgia whipped them like that is because their players didn't play. It would have been a completely different game. Georgia knows it. Everybody else in the world knows it. But because they're fighting this battle with the ACC, trying to be greedy, everybody's on Florida State's case. But deserving of an opportunity to be in the playoffs with a healthy quarterback, absolutely. So this has been Sports for Real. Catch you on the next live.